All right, so today on the Coach's Corner, uh, we're lucky enough to have a guest today, Coach Russell from Norwich Academy, formerly Kennebunk Ram, going to be on this episode today. We're going to talk to him a little bit about the recruiting process in Norwich University and a little bit of special teams and defense talk. So we'll kind of cover the gamut today. Welcome, Coach.
Hey, Coach. Thanks for having me.
First of all, just kind of tell us about the current state of Norwich football, how this season went for you and kind of the outlook moving forward.
Yeah, we had a really strange season, kind of the tale of 2 years. Going into the year, we knew we were going to be pretty good. We had 30 seniors, which is a huge class for us with a lot of experience. And we started off much as we expected. Came out of the gates 4-0. Really rolling, won 3 rivalry trophy games back-to-back weeks, and things were going well. And then adversity struck, and it struck over and over again. We battled an unbelievable amount of injuries. We ended up losing 3 of our starting offensive linemen for the year. One of them was a captain for us. We lost kind of our glue piece on defense, strong safety for us. He was the guy that made all the checks, got everybody lined up, did all those things. Really good player. So we faltered down the stretch. Some kids stepped up, though. We were competitive every week, really with the exception of one game. And I had a chance to win, had a lead in all of them except one, and just couldn't hold on. So, disappointing end to the year. But, the young guys, the guys that hadn't played as much really stepped up, and we're excited about going forward where they'll be. And, it's obviously not a great situation to not have your spring season of, we don't get to wear pads in D3, but we still get to get out there and practice and work on our installs and all that. So that's not ideal, but, we got to adapt and overcome. Everybody in the country is in the same boat. So, we're optimistic for the future. We're bringing back a quarterback who was among the nation's, top 20 passers. We had a rookie of the year on offense at receiver as a freshman. He'll be back. And we had the New England Division 2-3 Offensive Player of the Year, coming back. So future's bright. We got a lot to replace on defense, graduating quite a few guys. But, that's what you do. You get the next guy ready and you develop them, and hopefully that's what happens. So we're excited for it. It's it's a cool year Jets here when everybody's trapped in their house and can't get out there and do the things they want to do, but you got to make the best of it. Technology like this has been great to have, meetings with the players, check in with them academically, really stay connected and try to just make the best of the situation. Like I said, everybody's in the same boat. So, it is what it is, but, we feel good about the future. We're still as a D3 school, we're not done recruiting yet. We're coming down the home stretch. We're actually going to host a virtual visit tomorrow, kind of like this. So with a group of kids that hadn't yet had a chance to come up to campus. And so we'll see how that goes. We're all learning technology, I think, through this more than we ever thought possible. Right when we have a grasp on Huddle and all that stuff, now we're learning Zoom and GoToMeeting and stuff like that. So making the best of it, but it's we've got a real solid foundation here. So, always looking forward to the future.
Pause just for a second. I'll be right back. Sorry, I had a mini hoop basketball game break out in the kitchen.
No, not a problem.
Right. Talk a little bit about, you said you battled some adversity this year, and I think as coaches we kind of all go through that, where we, injuries and different things that come up, over the year. Sometimes you get kids suspended or injured, or you just have, sometimes when you're not playing as well as you would like. Talk about kind of as a staff how you handle those situations.
Yeah. To provide a little bit of context, as coaches will all understand, we ended up by the second week of the season, both of our captains were done for the year. So injuries are never good. Missing guys, all the reasons you listed is never good. But when it's your leadership, that's even worse. And it's, we found this year, I think it's, you can try to do it from the sideline, but not having those guys that were chosen by their teammates to lead out there was tough, but it was also a great learning experience for us and our staff. Our other guys did step up and assume leadership roles, which was great to see. But, it really, I think it comes down to, and we talk about this all the time, and I'm sure you guys at the high school level, you're in the same boat, is you're trying to maximize reps and development for your starters so that they're ready to play on Friday night or Saturday afternoon, whatever it may be. But how do you get those guys ready for, those guys that are behind them? How do you get them ready if an injury does occur? And I like to point out one specific example of, I'm sorry, let me close my email here on my computer.
No worries.
We had a specific example this year, I think, where I talked about our strong safety going down. His backup was a sophomore, had played a little bit as a freshman, primarily on special teams. Again, as a sophomore, was playing a lot of special teams, and good, solid football player from the Chicago area, great kid. We're playing the United States Merchant Marine Academy, and it's week 6, I believe. And the second series of the game, the third snap, our starting strong safety tears his ACL. So his backup, I'm certain he didn't go to bed Friday night thinking he was going to play a whole football game the next day.
Right.
And that's what he did. And to kind of make matters worse, they're running true academy style phone triple option at you. So, he went in and he performed well, but again, it's like, all right, hey, here you go, bud, get out there. So you got to try to find that balance, I think, between how do you get guys ready to play should their time come, while at the same time making sure the guys who, you're going to play are ready to play and execute the game plan. So we learned a lot this year about how to develop guys if they're not getting the physical reps, whether it's those mental reps or extra board work or extra film work or whatever it may be. But, you just never know. I referenced the captains getting hurt. One of them was our starting right tackle, and he was out for the year the first day of full pads in camp. So that changed things dramatically. We went from feeling really good about that position to who's going to be our right tackle.
Right.
So you got to adapt and overcome. But, I think we're all trying to find that balance between developing guys while at the same time getting those guys who are going to play ready to play. And, I think if any of us knew exactly the right answer, we'd probably be making a lot more money than we are now.
Right.
But, we really started to learn this year about how critical it is that those guys who are in the 2 deep or even the 3 deep in some cases, how you've got to have them ready to go in and execute a game plan and maybe play an entire football game while making sure the starter is ready to go. And, you do a lot of it in camp, which is great. But once you get into the regular season, it's tough. So, there's a lot of extra meetings, a lot of extra board work, a lot of extra film work with those guys to get them up to speed. Because there's a trickle-down effect, right? So the starter gets hurt. Okay, well, number 2 goes to number 1. That's expected. Number 3 goes to number 2. Well, especially at our level, well, now the guy who was on the scout team for the past month and really hasn't even run the offense or the defense because he's running the opponent's stuff. Well, now he's number 3. So he may not have run the Norwich offense or the Norwich defense since, August, and here it is the first week of October. So it's, you end up scrambling a little bit, but, through all of it, right, every coach knows when you go through adversity with your team, with your program, with your players, how you come out the other side, you better learn from it, right? Like adversity is adversity, but you better learn from it and take it as a step forward as to how you're going to handle things going forward. So it was a great learning experience for all of us, and I think will benefit us down the road.
Cool. You mentioned spring practice, so obviously this COVID-19 has thrown a little bit of a wrinkle into that. But kind of take us through what in Division III, what is a typical spring like
Yeah. I think people probably know, but just for those who don't, like, we're allowed 16 practices in a 5-week span, essentially. We are not allowed to wear any equipment at all. So, it's t-shirts and shorts or jerseys or whatever, but no helmets, no pads. Um, just a few years ago, in the grand scheme of things, we were finally allowed to use footballs and, bags and shields and stuff like that. Back when I was playing, it was strictly conditioning
Yeah,
for,
same for me. Those Tuesday, Thursday, Friday morning runs at 6 a.m. were not
yeah,
fun.
yeah, no doubt. I was in the same boat. So, it's nice to be able there. And it ends up being a lot of individual work, a lot of position group stuff, a lot of drill work. We do use the early portion of it as kind of a conditioning heavy piece, because our philosophy, right, wrong, or indifferent, has been once the guys get into the off-season strength program in January when the second semester starts, we're not necessarily worried that first month and a half about conditioning. We want to get our strength levels back to where they need to be, get guys starting to get strong. So we tell the kids, that first week and a half of spring ball, like, you're going to be out of shape, and we know you are. That's okay. It's more about the pushing through and getting some conditioning work in. Here in New England, particularly Vermont, you're always dealing with potential weather.
Right.
We are lucky at Norwich. We have significant indoor spaces available, but nothing beats, being out on the turf or out on the field. So, we do the best we can, but, we do get into, you can do some routes on air stuff. You can do some install, some walkthrough stuff. And again, a lot of indie work, which is great. That's something that we all preach, but during the season, sometimes it's tough.
Right.
And I know for you guys, it's probably even tougher when you got kids playing both sides of the ball and you got to get offense and defense in a practice. So the more time we can spend in the spring, just getting back to fundamentals and technique, the better we are. So that's the part that we're going to miss the most, I think. But, and you got to be creative as to what you do. You create competitive situations. We're not Division I, so we don't have the pads on. We're not playing a spring game. So whatever you can come up with to get your guys competing, I think, within the NCAA compliance rules, you do that, whether it's a tug of war or a tire pull or some sort of relay race or whatever it may be, incorporating football skills. But, we want to emphasize competition, and we want to emphasize development and fundamental work and start to install the things that we're going to install again in training camp. For us, we install the entire defense, the entire offense in August. We install it again in the spring, and then we install it again in August. So, if you're a sophomore, by the time your second regular season hits, you've been through 3 full installs, which is beneficial. But just missing out on all the stuff that I just talked about is certainly a curveball.
So you went to Kennebunk High School here in Maine, correct?
I sure did.
Tell us a little bit about playing for the legend, Coach Raff.
He is a legend. I was very, very fortunate, and I talk about him a lot. He's the best. He's not only an outstanding football coach, his longevity, his success, all that is apparent to anyone who's paying attention. But what I think, really separates him is the impact he makes in guys' development as a young man, and how that carries over. A lot of the things that we learn in the game of football do translate. But with Coach Raff, it was, you always knew that he had your best interest at heart. He was always honest. He has an unbelievable knack, and something that I'll chase for my entire career, of being really, really demanding. But always, you knew he had your best interest at heart. You wanted to do it, and we never feared Coach Raff. We feared disappointing him, which, I have felt that way still at 38 years old about my father. And really Coach Raff is like that a lot. So, I think one of the things that I point to a lot, because it's tough sometimes to articulate how important he is to the young people in Kennebunk is, I don't know the enrollment right now at Kennebunk High School. I'm pretty sure it's under 1,000. And just from my kind of the 5 years around me being in high school, there's like 25 of us that are coaching college athletics, let alone guys at the high school level and stuff like that. So, from such a small school in a small town, that's a banana stat. And I think the reason behind it is we have these unbelievable coaches, most notably Coach Raff, but, just within his staff, Rob Sullivan, Brian Dill, the late Dom D'Angelo, the list goes on. And then Charlie Birch was the lacrosse coach when I was there. He's at UNE now. He made a great impact on some guys. Pat Moody was the basketball coach. So I could name, a ton of people, but they influenced us so much that we followed in their footsteps. So, to this day, again, I graduated. I just went to my 20th high school reunion right around Thanksgiving. And, I still talk to Coach Raff at least once a month, if not more. We're in really constant, communication. He was just a really, really important man in my development, and someone that I hope the community of Kennebunk, I think they do. I hope they know how lucky they are to have him. And it's unbelievable to me that he's still the head coach in a good way in the same job all these years later. And he hasn't lost a step, right? Like Kennebunk football is in better shape now, maybe than ever. So that really speaks to, the job he's doing. And, I don't want to be too long-winded, but one of the things that I think is remarkable about Coach Raff is how well he adapts to his personnel. I remember being a fifth grader and going up, and I forget where the game was, but they were playing Old Town in the rain in 1991 and winning a state championship in a great game. And they were basically running the triple, under center, triple. And then in 1999, of course, the season after I graduated, but he's back in the state game, and they were playing. I went to it. They were playing Belfast, I think, at Coney. So it was more of a pro I type offense, more or less. And then now with their recent success, they've done some triple out of the gun. They're doing some spread principles, some zone read stuff. So he's reaching this high level of success, running all this different stuff, because good coaches, I think, adapt to their personnel, so he'll look at what does this year's team have? What do we do well? And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to coach the heck out of it and gets those kids to achieve at a really high level. So, I can't say enough about him as a football coach, as a man. He's the best.
I get to work a lobster bowl with Coach Raff. I think I've worked a couple with him. He was the head coach one year, and I got to call the plays for him. And it was, we had an outstanding time, for one, because he's such a great guy just to sit around and talk to, but also just to watch how he handled all the relationships between the kids, the trainers, the assistant coaches, everything. He's just a class act. So we'll move it on. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the recruiting process. So, if you're a high school player getting ready to move on, what can you expect? Maybe some tips and kind of what they should be doing in this process.
Yeah. All right. The first thing I would say is the overarching point I want to make is make sure you have an open mind. There are so many colleges out there, and some of them are really good at one thing, and some of them are really good at this thing, and some of them are really good at a lot of things, whatever it may be. But as a young, and I'm speaking to Bill Russell in 1998 as well when I say this, is have an open mind. You might hear XYZ coaches coming in, I'll use you. Coach Hath might say, hey, Norwich is coming in. Who would be interested in meeting with Coach Russell? And some guys will say, yeah, I want to, I'm interested. And some guys will say, no, thanks. And I was guilty of that, 20 years ago. But you don't know about a school until you have a chance to learn. So my advice to every high school player, and I say this a lot to them, is listen to everybody, talk to everybody, talk to all the coaches you can. The more you know about more schools, the more options you have. And obviously that's, that's important. So that would be kind of the first thing I would say is, have an open mind. To best position themselves, okay, the first thing I would say is, when coaches reach out, right, early on, especially at the lower levels, I use that term loosely, but, we have to cast a big net, right? We don't have the luxury that, Alabama has, where they can really hone in on, each coach can hone in on, a dozen, 2 dozen guys and target them. And they're the same, 2 dozen guys that all those teams are looking at. So we're going to cast a big net. So when a coach reaches out to you, whether it's on social media, through the mail, a phone call, a text, respond, right? Respond, because first thing is, chances are early on you don't know a lot about that school. And then you also don't know where that relationship might go. Say you're interested in, you really want to go to University A, and Coach Russell's at University B right now. So you blow off Coach Russell. Well, the nature of the business, who knows? Like a month from now, Coach Russell could be at University A, and all of a sudden you're hitting him up and you're sending him DMs and texting. Well, he remembers when you blew him off. So just have an open mind, talk to everybody, make your film available, talk to your high school coach, and say like, hey, can I put together a highlight? Can I have it, open? There's nothing worse than when a kid, says, hey, I'm really interested in your school. Can you take a look at my film? And then we try to, check it out and we can't get to it. It's private or whatever. Make it short. I'm going to let everybody in on a secret right now, is the great majority of college football coaches that I know, from the FBS level all the way down to 3 NAIA, they're watching 2 to 3 minutes tops. Your 9-minute highlight video isn't getting watched.
Right.
It's just too much. We're able to get a pretty good evaluation off a few minutes. You can put music on there. Most of us watch it on mute. So it doesn't really matter. Put your contact info on your film. It's great to see a kid on film. He sends you his film or whatever it may be, and maybe if he sent it to you, you can get email or whatever. But if there's no contact info in your film, sometimes it's tough to track that kid, especially if something like this happens, which hopefully will never happen again in our careers. But coaches aren't in schools right now, and kids, like, you might not be able to get in touch with that kid. So put your contact in your film, keep it brief, put your best stuff at the beginning. I just touched on, we're probably only watching a couple of minutes of it. The plays that you feel best highlight what you can do, put that at the front end of the tape. Don't make us go scouring for what you do really well. And then, just again, be open, communicate. You'll start, odds are you're going to start hearing from coaches. Let's say you're a rising senior right now. Right around this time of year, like you'll start hearing from guys. You probably have heard from them a little bit. I know I've done some 2021 stuff already. There's a plethora of camps out there, the one-day camps and prospect camps and all that. And I think what those are great for, quite candidly, they're not as great for the coaching piece, but they are an outstanding opportunity for you to get on a college campus, have those coaches evaluate you, and at the same time evaluate those coaches. That's a piece that gets overlooked a lot, right? Is, we hold a prospect camp in May, knock on wood, hopefully we're able to do it. But the selling point is you get to come up, you get to see our campus, you get on there early, you get to get in front of us. We can evaluate you as a player, but you can evaluate us too. Because if you're an inside linebacker and you're interested in Norwich and you love our campus, you come up to our camp, you have a great time, but you really don't like interacting with me, God forbid that ever happens, but it could, it's probably not a great fit for you from a football standpoint. So I think that part of it gets overlooked a little bit. it's a great opportunity for that. But, get yourself exposed, get out there, be realistic too. Understand that, if you're paying a lot of money to go to a camp, I'm not saying don't do that. I've paid significant amount of money to go to camps when I was a kid. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the school is going to offer you a full scholarship. There's a lot that goes to it. There's a lot of layers. But just be open-minded, get exposed to as many schools as possible. Reach out. If you're interested in a school, we all have social media. Just about every school that I know of, if you go to their football page, you can scroll right down and then click on a coach's email address or get his phone number. And believe me, you're not bothering us. If you're interested in our school and you're a potential college football player, we want to hear from you. So get in touch. Say, hey, coach, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so. I graduate, next year, and I'm really interested in your school. If you have your film already, say, here's my film. If you don't, we'll probably ask for it, but, get in touch. We're reaching out on our end, but it also helps to reach out and make those connections early, with the coach, if there's something you're interested in for them, communicate. This time of year, and this gets a little bit deeper once you're into the process a little bit more. Be communicative with coaches, right? So I'm going to make an analogy here. If your girlfriend breaks up with you, that's a tough conversation to have, or your significant other, whatever it may be. That's a tough conversation to have. But I think we'd all prefer that to, opening up social media and our significant other is with someone else and we've never had to talk about it. Right. That's the recruiting process too. You would want a coach to communicate with you to say, hey, we just don't have a spot for you, or whatever it may be, or we'd like you to walk on, we don't have a scholarship, whatever those different things would be. We as coaches have an obligation to be honest with players about that. And I think it goes to both, the same way. If you go into that, you listen to the coach, you do some research on the school, and you're just not interested, let us know. We're dealing with a lot of people. You got, I'm responsible myself for the state of Maine, central New Jersey, and then essentially the entire West Coast, including Texas, even in there, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, California, Colorado. So, I'm starting out at the beginning. I've got a lot of kids in the boat. We're getting in touch with all those kids at least once a week. We're calling, we're texting, we're whatever, swapping DMs, emails. So communicate. If you're not interested, let us know. We're not going to be mad at you. We might be disappointed. And the more disappointed we are, take it as a compliment. If we're disappointed that you're not talking to us anymore, it means you're a good player, and a good person, a good student, all that stuff. But, it's important to be honest. It's important to communicate. There's nothing worse than you feel like you've got a really good relationship with a prospect and that you're coming down to the wire and you're in his final 5 schools or his final 3 schools, whatever it may be. And then you open up Twitter and he's, excited to announce my commitment to XYZ school. And he hasn't said a word to you. That's unfortunate, and again, we're not going to be angry. We might be disappointed for sure. But I'd rather find out from you and have that hard conversation than find out without you saying a word to me. And, I don't think any kid would want to find out that the school is no longer recruiting them with a Twitter post. So, it cuts both ways. And I think the biggest thing is for me, when I'm recruiting, I try to think about 20 years ago, Bill Russell, how did he want to be recruited? How did he want to be communicated with? And I try to do that, and hopefully it's been helpful. But the biggest thing is be honest, communicate, be responsive, and have an open mind. There's a lot of schools out there that you don't know about yet, and they offer some really, really awesome and unique things. So go into every meeting with an open mind. I know you've got a great audience here, so I'm going to use an example. This has happened to me a lot, but right in Maine, a couple of years back, Coach Kiesel at Thornton had a kid who did go Division I, FBS Division I, And when I was coming in that day to the school, he said, hey, I want you to talk to him. I want him to have all his options on the table. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, this would be one kid. And he was. But I think it benefited everybody for that kid to sit in that room and listen, because you never know what the future holds. I was specifically shouting him out, but there's a lot of guys, particularly in the state of Maine, that have done that same thing for me, to me, and want me to talk to all their guys. Because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. And at that level, it's kind of a numbers game and all that stuff. So something could fall through that you thought was good to go. So it's always good to talk to everybody. So, I appreciated that from him, and that's one specific example. But, I could rattle off the list of guys just in the state of Maine that have done the same thing for me.
You coach the linebackers there at Norwich, correct?
Yes, sir.
So tell us a little bit, like, I'm a high school guy coming out of my senior year of high school, or I've got you looking at my tape. What are you looking for? Like what translates well to play linebacker at the next level?
Great. Well, the first thing I'll tell you, I get this question a lot from high school players. Coach, what's the height and weight of your linebackers? I get that a lot, and that's a valid concern, right? And I had the same concern coming out of high school: is, am I big enough? Am I tall enough? Am I whatever? All that stuff is great. I turn on film. You can play or you can't play. When people say he can't play because he's 5'8" or 5'9" or he's 2, you can play or you can't play, right? So I would tell guys, don't worry about that, right? We're going to turn on the tape, and you're either a football player or you're not, right? So that's the first part. Now, one of the things that happens a lot with linebackers, I get a high school tape, I'm looking at it, and he has his first 17 clips or tackles for a loss. Obviously, that's positive. Well, all 17 of them, he was blitzing. Now, the art of being able to blitz, there's a skill to that, so I'm certainly going to look at that. But I want to see you read, react, scrape, take on a block, do all those things. Because if you blitz every snap and nobody blocks you, I don't know if you're any good or not. I might know if you can run, and I might know if you're a hitter, but I don't know if you can, like, if somebody blocks you, are you done? Is the play over? So I would say to high school kids, make sure that that's on there. Show me everything that you do, everything that you need to do to play linebacker, get that on your tape. And sometimes at the high school level, this one's a little tougher because frankly, outside of some innovative guys, there's a lot of high schools by necessity, they're running the ball 80-90% of the time. So I've had some high school linebackers come in and I'm like, I don't know if they can play coverage or not. I didn't see it on tape. So make sure you get that on there. I'm sure at some point during the year you're going to do it, and whether the ball's thrown your way or not, we're gonna look at it. We're gonna see how are his hips. Can he drop? Can he play man if he's ever asked to? Because we do that. But it's more important to get your entire skill set on film than it is just you making big plays. If that makes sense. But
that's a good point.
Yeah, and to kind of jump back to my previous point about the height and weight stuff and all that stuff's great. Like, listen, if there's a kid who's 6'1" and 220 pounds and runs well, yeah, we're certainly going to be excited about that. But some of the best kids I have had in 15 years of this were 5'10" or below. So don't worry about that stuff. And your 40 times, your 40 times. You can put whatever you want on your huddle film. I'm telling every high school football player right now, put whatever you want. I give you free license. I'm going to turn on the tape. If you can run or you can't, and I've probably had 3 kids I've had some kids that definitely put accurate times, but when you start looking at guys that put 4.5, 4.6, I probably had 3 kids in 15 years that put a time like that, and I turn on the tape and they're playing high level football and nobody's catching them. And I was like, well, they probably do it on a 4.5 or 4.6.
Right.
But playing linebacker, I think more than any other position really, being smart, knowing your assignments and having great technique can make up for a lot of deficiencies in terms of size and speed. One of the best kids I've ever had, If I brought out the stopwatch, it wasn't going to be very good. Average in the weight room, not bad in the weight room, but average in the weight room. Athletically decent. But man, was he a smart football player, and he knew the playbook every bit as well as I did. And he was a stud. He was an absolute stud, and you couldn't not have him on the field. And if he wasn't on the field, you missed him. So that part of the game too.
Fun guys to coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And that part of the game, as a high school player, you worry about, am I strong enough? Am I fast enough? And there's a part for that. That stuff's not going to hurt you. But getting in the playbook and knowing your assignments is every bit as critical. So, it's
what do you guys run for a scheme out there at Norwich?
We're a base 3-4. We run really everything under the sun, but we base everything out of a 3-4. And one of the reasons we went to that, and it was right around the time I got here, we made that switch in 2007, 2008. At the Division III level in particular, right, you start looking around at the high school football players that you're recruiting, right? And for us, I mean, and probably for you and everybody else that's listening, 75% of the guys out there, if not more, are between 5'10" and 6'2", and they're between 185 and 225. So when you look at defensively, what are those guys? They're linebackers, right? So we're like, well, let's run a scheme that allows us to A, suit what we do well, and B, who are we going to be able to recruit? Let's get more linebacker types on the field. It also was like, where is offensive football going, right? You can dig your heels in on a defense, but you better be adaptable to what the opponent's doing offensively. So, it went from, we were seeing a lot of like eye stuff and, people running ISO and power. And then as the spread proliferated, you really kind of got to attack it differently defensively. Guys like you out there in the lab cooking stuff up all the time, we got to try to stay ahead of the curve. But so that was kind of why we made the switch, and we're going to get to a 4-man front in some way, shape, or form. Post snap, it's just we like the flexibility of which guys are going to be, right? That's been great for us. One of those backers is coming. Just where's he coming from? Right. It really can mess with some protections.
A little less predictable than
exactly. No doubt. Now we play some
4-man front.
Right, no doubt.
Also coordinate the special teams.
Yep.
You also coach the special teams, correct?
Yes, I do.
Tell us a little bit about kind of like number one, what that preparation is like at the college level. You've got to manage kickoff, kick return, punt return, all that sort of stuff, and you've got this kind of pool of players to choose from. And then you kind of game plan for teams. Just kind of take us through that process for a minute to kind of finish up.
Sure, no doubt. The first piece I'll say, you kind of talked about preparation, is our mantra at Norwich has been special teams is really important, right? And every coach in America will tell you special teams is important. What I challenge a lot of guys that I talk to is, if I come to your practice and watch, is that true? Because you can say it's important, but do you dedicate the time to it? And the reason I bring that up is our head coach, Mark Murniak, has done an unbelievable job of giving me a lot of time in practice to make sure that we're solid special teams wise. He's really walking the walk there. So I always challenge guys that when I talk to them, whether it's at a convention or a clinic or whatever, you say special teams is important, but your actions better reflect that, and the kids need to see that. You can tell them punt's the most important thing we do. Punt's the most important thing we do. And then if you practice it for 10 minutes a week, they know that you're not telling them the truth, or you don't believe what you're saying. So that's number one. And again, I'm really fortunate that I get a lot of time during the week to do special teams. To your point, have a big pool. We're carrying about 120 kids on the roster every year. We do play a JV schedule, so guys are playing, but there is a lot of bodies available, particularly a home game where there's no travel squad involved. So I tell guys all the time coming through the door, you're a freshman. Oftentimes your first opportunity to make an impact and make it, get an opportunity to get on the field is through special teams. And that snowballs into now you start to get reps, and the next thing you know, you're playing offense or defense a lot. But, that's a lot of times a way to get your foot in the door. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge I welcome in the sense of handling day-to-day, stuff to help Coach Murniak with just day-to-day operations of the program, right? I've always felt that as the associate head coach, my role is to take as much off his plate as I can and try to make his job as easy as possible. And the better the head coach looks, the better the assistants are, so that's kind of priority number one. I'm responsible for a position group, as you touched on, of making sure the inside linebackers are ready to play. They know the game plan. They know the scout report. They've watched their film. We've had our meetings. But I've also got to do make sure the special teams kickoff, kick return, punt return are ready to go, and the depth chart's good to go and all that as well. And one of the big challenges there has been I post a daily depth chart for special teams in the locker room because it changes almost daily for a variety of reasons. Injury, some kid I'm like, this is our best jammer on, the gunners on punt. He's the guy, he's a corner. Those kids can't get down the field and cover. Well, if he's going to miss 2 days of practice that week for an academic, commitment, or a place like Norwich for a military commitment, as much as he might be good at it, I can't put him out there. He hasn't practiced it, and that's not fair to him. So I'm not going to put kids in that position. So that thing changes almost daily. So it's a lot of, juggling and catching kids up and making sure. And, one thing I learned early in my career was, on a Thursday once, I made a swap with a kid early in my special teams career, I should say. And that kid went out there Saturday and he didn't perform well at all. And the head coach got on me a little bit, and I was like, he knows what he's supposed to do. And he looked at me and he said, well, did he practice it? And I thought back and I said, well, he really didn't. He kind of went through the walkthrough and that's it. And I learned there that was my fault. That wasn't his fault. That wasn't the player's fault. That was my fault. I did not put him in a position to succeed. So that becomes really time consuming of making sure you've got the guys out there you need out there, and making sure that they're, prepared and know their assignments and their techniques. I know Coach Capone touched on this a little bit the other day. At our level of football, we don't have a bunch of scholarship guys on the bench waiting to play. So we've got to use our good players on special teams, and our really good players. They have to be involved. We try to limit, kind of my unofficial policy has been like, if you're a starting corner, you're going to no more than 2 special teams will you be a starter on. Now, right. When you start to get into road games, you've got a travel squad. Numbers are, those guys who are starters, they're in the 2 deep on special teams no matter what. I've only got, 60 players to work with or whatever. And when 10 or 11 or 12 of them are offensive linemen, I love offensive linemen, but I don't want them covering kicks. Right. That's tricky. So you got to find a way to make sure those kids are invested too. And I also believe, you can't put a round peg into a square hole, right? So if a kid just doesn't want to do it and you keep putting them out there, you're hurting the unit, you're hurting the team. It's not conducive to success. So
yeah, we've had that discussion quite a bit on our staff when, you get into those, well, do we want to use this starter on the kickoff team, or do we want to use maybe this sophomore who athletically isn't quite there yet, but he's hungry, he wants to be out there. And I would say typically we land on that sophomore because he wants to be out there. And sometimes those starters, they don't want to, they don't want to run down on a kickoff sometimes, or, maybe they're never coming off the field. Kick and kick return is the only break they can get. So, I think we fight the same battle of, we're going to try to get as many non-starters out there as we can. And we'll give all those guys a shot in the preseason and the exhibition game and maybe even week 1. And then, from there, as the season goes on, sometimes we have to creep some starters, kind of up the depth chart a little bit. But, it's definitely a juggling act. And one of those things, like you mentioned, a good point was, it changes daily. the depth chart discussion at the high school level, I don't think is much different where, just fewer guys to choose from probably, but, you're having to manage things every day. Like, oh, well, so-and-so, the trainer's not letting him practice today. So, this guy's got to get the inside backer reps, and then this guy behind him better get the number 2 reps, whatever few reps those are going to be today. And, oh, yeah, we're doing kickoff today, so we better rep so-and-so. So I think that's a big part that, a lot of us struggle with. And certainly, at Levitt, we're lucky enough to have some guys on staff that are pretty knowledgeable, and those guys can handle that and take some of that off of my plate. But it's definitely a struggle.
Yeah, for sure. And, you just made a great point, and I'd be remiss not to mention of, the way we do it is I'm obviously ultimately responsible for the whole thing, but, our staff, the other assistant coaches one guy's responsible for the, the right side of the pump protection, or, we went to a shield, so it kind of different than what I just talked about, but nonetheless, right. And this guy's responsible for the front line, of kickoff return, and this guy's got the Y's and this guy's got the F's, whatever it may be. So, those guys do a really good job of helping me get the unit ready. Like I'll install the scheme and this is what I want, but they're coaching up position. And one thing we do a lot, and probably should do even more, but I get greedy and I want to see the whole unit, but we do a lot of indie in the special teams game, of just breaking down, okay, you're the right tackle and the right guard on kick return. This is your assignment. We're going to put a couple scouts over there and just work on that depth and that block and that depth and that block on these different returns, and vice versa, so on and so forth throughout the entire kick game. And I try to do, like with kickoff, particularly early in the season, but we'll break it down and do, break it down to where we're working on a specific part, and whether we're rotating through a circuit or whatever. But, we might you're going to go just get offs for 10 minutes. We're just going to do get offs. And then, the next part of it is we'll do the, avoid and stack, and then a collision and escape. But again, I'm really lucky to have a head coach that lets me do those things, but, it's important to break it down, and I'm super, super guilty of being a poor delegator. And I'm owning that right now, and something 15 years in, I'm trying to work on. And as I've, quote unquote, moved up the ladder responsibility wise, I should be getting better at it, and I'm probably getting worse, to where I try, I won't say that I micromanage. I don't think it's a micromanaging thing, but I think it's, I have a tendency, especially on Saturday, to just take that whole thing over,
Right.
And I've got to do a much better job. We've got really good coaches, and letting those guys coach, and they do, but letting them on game day, the right tackle, if I'm not coaching him, the right tackle on kick return, like, he doesn't need me in his ear right now. He needs the guy who worked all week in his ear. So I've got to do a better job with that. And, it's certainly a flaw, and I think being aware of it, hopefully I can get better at it.
I usually find that our defense plays a little bit better on game day when Coach Hathaway stays off the defensive headset and doesn't bother Coach Monavie and Coach Gray and Coach Marston with what they're doing. So,
right.
That's you learn that as you go along, and I don't coach a position anymore on defense either. Which when I first started, I was coordinating both sides and coaching linebackers and quarterbacks, and I think that's a good point. Over time you learn that if you put some trust in some guys and really put some trust in them and let them own it, they're probably not going to let you down. So
no doubt.
That's a point out there to the coaches. So, Coach, thanks a lot. This was an awesome interview. I'd like to have you on again maybe someday and talk specifics on some special team schemes maybe. It'd be kind of cool.
Sure. Anything I could do to help. And, thanks so much for having me on and giving me the opportunity to represent Norwich. And I think what you're doing and making positive use of our downtime and what you're doing for Maine high school football is really, really awesome. So, thanks so much. And anytime, I'd be happy to come back.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care. Stay safe.
You too. Still recording. I gotta learn how to shut that off.